Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time to dial in. Welcome back to another episode. I am your host with the most, the big guy himself, Colin O'Callahan. We're entering week 14, which is shocking. The season completely flew by. We're already in the first week of December, which means all the Swifties are going to be playing that song in just a few moments. And I think right now we just jump right into the show and get right into the picks. So let me share the screen here. Always forget to press that button. Here we go. Oh, look at that Patriot schedule. All right. So before we get into all the games that are going to be taking place between the 4th and the 8th, there is one game that I do want to bring up. And no, it's not because I'm the Patriots fan. It's because both of these teams are on a bye. We have the New England Patriots versus the New York Giants. They played each other on Monday night, and the Patriots blew out the Giants 33-15. Yes, Drake May vaulted his way back to the top of the MVP race, and he was absolutely sensational. Over 280 yards, a passer rating over 126. They were really sharp in the first half, and they did just enough to win in the second. But a lot of the damage was, ironically, on the special teams. Their first play, because they made three huge plays in that game that completely swung the whole thing around. The first was the 94-yard return touchdown from Marcus Jones that put the Patriots ahead 10-0. The second play was midway through the second quarter. The Giants were about to kick a 43-yard field goal to make it a one-score game, and Younghoe Koo slipped on the release, and Jamie Gillan had to take a sack because the play got busted. And then not too long afterwards, after the Patriots went ahead 24-7, Gunnar Olszewski got drilled on the kickoff return, fumbled the football, and New England fell on it in field goal range. And from that point on, the whole game just got completely out of hand. So the Patriots ended up winning 33-15. They were by far the more physical team. New England's won 10 in a row, and the Giants are unfortunately just back to being, a laughable franchise again. I did see that Joe Schoen had a press conference before the bye week, and he was 40 minutes late to it, and it just went as poorly as you would have wanted it to go. But yeah, it's just, I don't know what else to say about this team. It feels like anything I've said about them, it just keeps reappearing itself time and time and time again. And they're broken once again. And the only reason why they're not the second or the worst team in the National Football League is because you got teams like the Titans and the Raiders in different conferences. So yep, we can just move on from that game and just jump right into the picks. Tonight we have the Dallas Cowboys versus the Detroit Lions. This week was the final week of the quarter at my journalism school, and I got a chance to run into one of my good friends, Brock Morgan. And, he's an outstanding guy, one of the most down-to-earth dudes you could ever meet, outstanding person. But every time I see him, I get this very, very annoying pit in my stomach, even though I love him. Because every time I see Brock, I know I'm going to have to hear about the Dallas Cowboys. And to his credit, over the last 4 days, he's been justified because they not only came back against the Philadelphia Eagles, they just beat the Kansas City Chiefs on Thanksgiving afternoon. After Dak Prescott threw an interception on the opening drive and Rashee Rice scored on the ensuing play, I thought, okay, here we go again. The Chiefs are going to, have a big win on the road. The Cowboys are going to choke like always, but it didn't happen that way. Instead, Dak Prescott outplayed Patrick Mahomes, even though he was phenomenal himself. Dak Prescott had well over 300 yards, a couple touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes, he was sensational. He had 4 touchdowns of his own, but Kansas City committed a lot of penalties. They had bad drops. They lost 2 of their starting tackles. Their defense was incredibly penalized with a lot of holds and pass interference plays. And Dallas was able to hold on to the fourth quarter despite Mahomes literally doing every single thing in his power to try to get his team back in the game. And now Dallas is playing with house money against the Detroit Lions, who, unlike the Cowboys, got their butts handed over to them at home against the Green Bay Packers. They actually had a chance. They were down, 17-14 at the start of the third quarter. They got the ball to start the second half, but they faced 4th and 3 in field goal range. They had a chance to either tie the game or take the lead. And on 4th and 3, you run out of shotgun with Jahmyr Gibbs, and it goes completely nowhere. And 2 plays later, Christian Watson streaks his way down the sideline for a 50-plus yard touchdown. And all of a sudden, Green Bay goes ahead 24-14 when the Lions could have been ahead 21-17. Detroit pretty much had to play keep up the rest of the way. They tried to go for it on fourth down again, but Jameson Williams let the ball fall right through his hands. And at the end of the day, Jordan Love outplayed Jared Goff. Love had 4 touchdowns. Jared Goff wasn't completely bad, but those 2 fourth down plays just, came back to bite him. And the offensive line really struggled. They let up 2.5 sacks from Micah Parsons, and it couldn't have come at a worse time because just the day before, Frank Ragnow, the former center for the Lions, announced that he was coming out of retirement, only for him to fail his physical due to a grade 3 hamstring strain, which I honestly don't know how in God's name Ragnow thought it was possible that he was going to come out of retirement from that, because I'm not a doctor, but from what I know, a grade 3 hamstring strain, it's almost like a full muscle tear. So, that fiasco blew up pretty quickly. And unfortunately, the interior was a big reason why, Detroit's offensive line has struggled, because they don't have Graham Glasgow. Obviously, Penei Sewell on the right tackle, on the right side of the line. He is questionable for this game due to an injury. And, they haven't been as strong as they've been in the last 2 years. And now they're entering this game without Amon-Ra St. Brown. They won't have Terrion Arnold, and they're not going to have Kirby Joseph. So they're going to need to have a really complete game. Probably I wouldn't say the most complete game, but they're going to need to be in lockstep in all 3 phases for them to win this game, because not only do they have key absences, but after every loss, they have won every single game. And right now, they don't even have a playoff spot right now. They're the 8th seed in the NFC right now, behind the San Francisco 49ers. So they're going to really need to run the table the rest of the way for them to even have a chance. Now, having said that, I can't believe I'm actually saying this. I actually have the Cowboys winning this game. It's because the Cowboys offense has been more effective. They have been more lethal. The defense has been absolutely outstanding since the trade deadline. And Detroit, unfortunately, they just have too many key losses right now. The defense doesn't have 2 of their starting defensive backs. And offensively, when you don't have your best receiver, you're really going to have to rely on guys like, Khalif Raymond and Jameson Williams. And obviously, you got Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and Brock Wright. But you don't have Amon-Ra St. Brown. You don't have Sam Laporta. Your interior is really banged up. And it's just, you're going to really need to rely on a near perfect game from Jared Goff for them to really have a chance. So, Brock Morgan mentioned. Yep, there you go. So for my final score, I'm going to pick the Dallas Cowboys to win this game 34-20. If you don't pick the Browns, I will be very disappointed. Well, you know what? Let's actually go to that game. Let's see who they got. The Tennessee Titans. Yeah, you got this one in the bag. Let's actually jump forward to this game. So the Titans, they predictably got trounced by the Jacksonville Jaguars 25-3. I mean, Jacksonville wasn't completely lights out. I mean, they had, a few big scoring drives here and there. I mean, but at the end of the day, they didn't make any mistakes. Trevor Lawrence was effective, yet they were really sloppy. I mean, they were really bad on third down. They committed a lot of penalties. They couldn't really run the football very well, but fortunately, they were playing against the worst team in the National Football League. So as long as Jacksonville had a pulse, then they would have been fine. Cam Ward barely threw for 140 yards on 20 completions with over 30 pass attempts. They couldn't run the football per usual. They had a big amount of penalties as well. And after the opening drive, they just could not get on the board the rest of the afternoon. So Jacksonville did what they needed to do, but Cleveland, unfortunately, got blown out by the 49ers. And I feel like an absolute fool for giving that monologue of how they could pull off an upset against the 49ers, because listen, Jim Schwartz, he was 9-1 against Kyle Shanahan entering that game. And, the defense was able to, had the pieces to really throw San Francisco's offense out of whack. So I thought, okay, this is going to be a pretty good upset. But, Cleveland kept it close in the first half. They had a big touchdown to Harold Fanta Jr. Quinshon Judkins had a 2-point conversion that gave Cleveland the lead. But the 49ers offense, to their credit, they, got their composure back. They adjusted. And really, it took a muff punt from Gage Larvadain, to really blow the gates wide open. And Shedeur Sanders wasn't the biggest reason why they lost, but he wasn't really the biggest solution either. Cleveland's offense couldn't score in the second half. The defense just, was on its heels through most of that second half. And, the 49ers were just a better football team, pure and simple. So this game is going to be really unwatchable. It's going to be really boring. But I will say this. I don't think it's going to be as big of a blowout as other people expect. I think both defenses are going to be extremely physical. We know Cleveland is going to really run the football, but the two quarterbacks are going to be under the biggest spotlight. You got the number one overall pick and the guy that everybody says should have been taken in the first round. Cam Ward is going to go through a lot of fire because he's been sacked the most times out of any quarterback. He's been sacked, 48 times now? And now you've got the NFL's leading sacker on the other side of the line that you got to deal with for 60 straight minutes. So it's going to be torture for him. The Titans are the worst rushing team in the league. They don't have any explosive playmakers. Their offensive line is flat out abysmal. So on the surface, you might think, okay, this should be a blowout. But Cleveland's offense leaves a lot to be desired as well because despite having a promising rookie in Quinshon Judkins and having a decent playmakers on their offensive side with Jerry Jeudy and Fannin and Njoku, you just really don't know what you really have at the quarterback position. And if Shedeur Sanders does not play well within these next 2 weeks, then I'm scared that Kevin Stefanski is going to get desperate and say, you know what, let's see how Deshaun Watson looks in the final 3 weeks. Because they activated him from the PUP list. They allowed him to return to practice. So I am just hoping that Shedeur Sanders just has a respectable day against Tennessee. And I think he will do that. So I think the Browns should win. I think they'll be the more physical team. And for a final score, I'll say they win this game 20-10. I think that's a good bet. So, Ryan Hinsky, you're welcome. All right, let's see what we have next on the docket. We got the Dolphins and the Jets. Again, you got two teams here, really two fan bases, who are so deluded in the fact that they could turn their seasons around. I mean, the Dolphins actually have more of a valid claim because they're only 2 games back from 500. But the Jets fan base, particularly one Jonah White from Medill Sports, thinks that they could really have a 7-win season. Well, actually, they can't. Actually, yeah, they could have 7 wins. A 7 to 8 win season because of one Tyrod Taylor. I'll give them credit where it's due. They beat the Falcons. They gave us a chance to laugh at them for choking once again. Really, this was a winnable game for Atlanta. Their offense, looked decent for the most part, but the Jets always found a way to respond every single time. And when the Atlanta Falcons actually did have a chance to, close the deal, they went back-to-back they went 3 and out on back-to-back drives. They only took 50 seconds off the clock. And when Tyrod Taylor did have the ball in his hands last, to his credit, he made outstanding plays with his legs. He found Adonai Mitchell on a couple big throws, and it was enough to set up a 56-yard winner for Nick Folk, who, ironically, earlier in that game, missed his first field goal attempt of the season. So Tyrod Taylor showed up in the clutch. The Atlanta Falcons, they completely embarrassed themselves once again. And I'll get to them in just a second, but they just really need to blow it up. I'm talking about the Falcons, of course. And the Jets are actually having, they have somewhat of a bit amount of hope against the Dolphins team that, barely escaped with a win over the New Orleans Saints. They had an outstanding drive to start the game. They scored a touchdown in just a few minutes. And afterwards, they couldn't even score a touchdown through the rest of the game. Now, they were up 16-0 at halftime, but they only scored 3 points in the second half. Tua Tagovailoa ended up throwing another interception. He's got 14 now, which is tied for the league lead with Geno Smith. And it just felt like they were doing everything in their power to give New Orleans the win. They gave up a touchdown to cut the deficit to 2, but thankfully, Minkah Fitzpatrick bailed the Dolphins out with a pick 2, going 98 yards to the house to make the score 21-17. But then the special teams just sat back and let the Saints recover the onside kick, and the defense, forced a huge stop on 4th down to barely escape with that win. So it was really a sloppy game. Really, I don't really think either team deserved to win in this one, but somebody had to in the end. And, Devon Achane, he really kept the Dolphins offense in shape. Tua wasn't particularly dominant through most of the afternoon. And The defense, while they did bend a few times, they didn't break, and they were the biggest reason why they won this game. And the Saints, they just made too many mistakes to win at the end. So for this particular game, I hate to say it, buddy, I got to go with the Dolphins here. Tua is still undefeated against the New Jersey Jets. Yes, I am still saying the New Jersey Jets because it is where they play and it is where they belong, but I digress. The Dolphins, they have a more explosive offense, to say the least, because you still have Achane, you still got Waddle. Darren Waller came back, in pretty good shape, from his injury that kept him on IR. And more importantly, that defense has been, really solid over the last 4 to 5 weeks. And it's a big reason why they've been on the late half run that they've been in. And more importantly, the Jets are really playing for Aaron Glenn, but, the Dolphins are really fighting for Mike McDaniel here. And, earlier in the season, we thought, the Dolphins, they were probably going to blow it up after they got demolished by the Baltimore Ravens. They ended up sacking Chris Grier, the general manager. We thought Mike McDaniel was going to be the next to go, but the players are fighting for him. They're not giving up, and, he might have his job next year. I don't think that means that they're going to completely turn things around next year because they still have a lot of holes to address, but at the same time, I like how this part of the season has gone for them. And who knows, maybe they could finish with a winning record, because if you look at the rest of their schedule, they got the Jets, they got Pittsburgh, they've been stumbling. Cincinnati, that'll be hard to win. Then you got Tampa, and then you got the Patriots. So the final 3 weeks are going to be hard, but at the very worst, you're going to have 7 wins? That's not terrible considering that they were 0-4 to start the year. So let's move on, because I feel like I've talked too much about this game. Let's see what we got here. Let me see what my notebook has. All right, we got the Ravens and the Steelers. This is going to be one heck of an ugly game, because the AFC North is probably in the weakest state it has been in quite a long time. Both teams are tied for the division lead right now at 6-6, and they don't look really good right now. I'm scared that whoever wins this division is going to flame out in the first round, and it's for the same reason. Their offenses. Aaron Rodgers got absolutely blitzed by the Buffalo Bills. Now, they were up 7-3 at one point. The defense was able to force a couple of key turnovers, yet the offense, they were okay. They capitalized off of one turnover. But Buffalo, at halftime, they made the adjustments they needed to. They got refocused. They knew what they needed to do, and all it took was one play for the entire momentum to swing around. And it was the strip sack from Joey Bosa that led to a scoop and score from Christian Benford. Because afterwards, not only did Aaron Rodgers, re-aggravate his wrist injury, but an ensuing interception from Mason Rudolph to Christian Benford just blew the gates wide open. And Buffalo scored on every single drive of that second half to just completely pull away 26-7. The Steelers' offense was anemic. Aaron Rodgers looked washed and flat out exhausted. The Steelers' offense just did nothing throughout the entire second half. I think they had 3 total yards in the third quarter. But even more alarming was how bad their defense looked. If you told me that Josh Allen was only going to throw for 123 yards, I would say that Pittsburgh, might have pulled off one of the biggest upsets of the year. But the Bills ran the ball 51 times, and they had 250 yards on the ground. James Cook had 144 yards of them on 32 carries. The Steelers got their asses kicked, and they got absolutely embarrassed on their home field. It's unacceptable. It got so bad to the point that the fans were booing during Renegade, and they were chanting "Fire Tomlin." And they're still 6-6. They're tied for the division lead. The fan base is broken. And going on the road to play the Baltimore Ravens, who are in desperate need of a bounce-back win, you can't afford to stumble into another embarrassing defeat, because if you do, then the Steelers are going to have to make a couple of massive changes, and it's not going to be pretty. Do I think the Steelers are going to fire Tomlin? I'm going to doubt it, especially if they get another winning record. He's probably going to have that job as long as he wants, along with John Harbaugh. But the Ravens are not exactly in the best situation either, because let's put this in proper perspective, okay? They go on the road to play the Cleveland Browns. Offense doesn't look too great, but the defense, does enough to win that game by 7. Okay. The next week, they play the Jets. We think they're going to blow them out, but they look flat in the first half. And, to their credit, they did the bare minimum to win that game by double digits, 23-10. Then Thanksgiving night happens against the Cincinnati Bengals. You got Joe Burrow coming back from injury. T. Higgins is out. Trey Hendrickson is out. The Ravens are at home. They got the alternate purple unis, which are stylish, by the way. I really like how they did those. But you're down 12-7 at halftime. The defense actually did really well in the first half. They only gave up 4 field goals. They had a goal line stand, midway in the first half. And yet it was all for naught because the offense turned the ball over 5 times. 5 times. One of them from Isaiah Likely on what should have been a 44-yard touchdown, but it ended up being a 43-yard catch and run that ended with a fumble in the end zone for a touchback. And once that play happened, I'm like, yeah, the Bengals better find a way to pull away, better find a way to, put this game out of reach. Because if they somehow walk or stumble into another self-inflicted defeat, then Zach Taylor might have been fired on the spot. And I'm not exaggerating here, but in the third quarter, the Bengals had 2 key touchdown drives that allowed them to go ahead by double digits. And the Ravens offense just looked really one-dimensional. Derrick Henry only carried the ball 10 times, which some of it, some of the complaints are justified because you're like, how are you not utilizing Derrick Henry? But he's had a heavy workload over the last, 6 to 7 games. So I wasn't completely, annoyed with the fact that he didn't get as many touches as he did, but whatever. The offense was one-dimensional. Lamar Jackson really did not look like he was 100%. I know that he's been battling a lot of injuries, including an ankle one that's, affected his mobility, but I'm not using that as an excuse because if you look at the absences on Cincinnati's side of things, you would have thought, okay, they probably have no chance. But they ended up winning by 18 points. And it gave a lot of their fans, delusions of grandeur that, oh boy, we're going to pick up right where we left off last year. We're going to do the same thing we did last year where, we went from being 4-8 to winning 5 in a row to finish with a winning record. And I hate to say it, Olivia Craycraft, you're probably not going to make the playoffs because you've lost way too many games. And more importantly, Joe Burrow's absence was too big to overcome. So, but hey, stranger things have happened, but we'll get to the Bengals later. In this particular game, yeah, I'm going to pick the Ravens here. Lamar Jackson didn't practice today because of that ankle injury, but I will say this. As long as they could run the football, as long as they don't turn the ball over, then I think that'll be the bare minimum because this Steelers offense is just so hard to watch. They are absolutely garbage. They're not as bad as another team that's in the same state, but we'll get to them in just a second. So I'm going to say that the Ravens win in a very low-scoring battle, 17-10. All right, moving on. We've got the Bucs and the Saints. So on paper, you might think this is going to be an easy blowout, but something tells me that this is going to be a pretty interesting trap game here. And the reason why is because the Saints defense has quietly been good against the pass. I think they give up, the 7th fewest passing yards in the National Football League, which is kind of impressive considering that they don't have a lot of, talent in their secondary. But Tampa Bay, they barely eked out a win over the Arizona Cardinals. Their offense was decent. They had a fun touchdown pass to Tristan Wirfs. Bucky Irving came back and had, somewhat of a respectable day. But Baker Mayfield, he only had only just over 190 passing yards. They were doing everything they could to, try to keep the Cardinals from hanging around. But the defense, they forced 2 key turnovers. They had a missed field goal. There was a 4th down stop midway in between that allowed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to kick a field goal to go ahead 20-10. And when the Cardinals actually did have a chance to either extend the game or win it outright, they barely picked up 10 yards and they turned the ball over on downs, and Tampa Bay was able to escape. So the last time they played the Saints in the Superdome, the Bucs offense only scored 1 touchdown, yet they still won 23-3 because the defense took over the game from start to finish. Spencer Rattler got benched, and Tyler Shuck ended up taking over, and, the rest is history. So I think the Bucs defense should be able to, win this game convincingly, but Tyler Shuck is kind of an unpredictable quarterback here. Either you're going to get the guy that balled out against the Carolina Panthers at Carolina, the same team that just beat the Los Angeles Rams on Sunday, or you're going to get the Tyler Shuck that just, doesn't look ready to be a starting quarterback. The one that got completely dominated against the likes of LA, Atlanta, and Miami. So it'll be interesting to see what type of performance we get here. But at the end of the day, I expect the Bucks to, hang on at home. Their offense is starting to get a little healthier. They activated the practice windows for both Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan. So even though they're not going to be ready to return right away, you can tell that, things are starting to, head in the right direction for this team. Their defense is a lot more dominant. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to the quarterback play. And when you look at it between Baker Mayfield and Tyler Shough, I don't think it's too hard to, figure out like who you trust more in, the final 2 minutes of the game. So I'm going to expect the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to win this one 23-16. All right, let's see what we got next. The Jacksonville Jaguars and the Indianapolis Colts. Here we go. This one is going to be all for all the marbles here because even though they, play each other again, I think in the regular season finale. Actually, no, I think it's a little closer to that. But the point is, whoever wins this game is going to have the upper leg of the division. And unfortunately for Indianapolis, they're the odd ones looking in because the Jaguars have not lost at home to the Indianapolis Colts since 2014. And unfortunately, it looks like that streak is going to continue because Jacksonville is playing with a lot of house money right now. They've won 3 in a row. Their offense is getting better. The defense has been absolutely outstanding in 2 of the last 3 weeks. And ever since that 29-10 debacle against the Houston Texans, I don't know what was said in that locker room, but Liam Cohen, he definitely, whatever he said, completely resonated with everybody in that locker room, including himself. And the Colts, unfortunately, I've been warning them about this, for a while now. If Jonathan Taylor does not have an outstanding game, then Daniel Jones is not exactly going to be the guy that's going to put the team on his back and carry them to victory. He's more of a complementary piece and a guy that's going to be in shotgun than a guy that, rather than the person that's going to be behind the wheel. So, and I hate to say that because I love the way that Daniel Jones has fought this year. The fact that he's trying to play through a fractured fibula, reportedly trying to play through a fractured fibula, is flat out impressive, but that's not the biggest reason why they're losing, and I think the team knows that as well. So, Indianapolis is coming off a pretty gut-wrenching defeat to the Houston Texans for the reasons that I just brought up, while the Jaguars, they ended up blowing out the Tennessee Titans right on schedule. So, with this game, I'm going to pick the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it's for one big reason, and I brought this up earlier. The Indianapolis Colts, like I said, if you can't run the ball, the offense is, like I said, you can't run the football, Daniel Jones is not going to be the guy to lead you to victory. The Jaguars, they have the best rushing defense in the National Football League. Now, they do struggle against the pass, but knowing that Daniel Jones is not at 100% strength, if he looks incredibly limited and if he can't move around the way he used to, then I hate to say it, Jacksonville is going to make this a pretty lopsided affair. And I think that things are going to get out of hand very, very quickly. But hey, if Joe Flacco could take this team to the wire last year, then I hope Daniel Jones can do the exact same here. But for my final score, I'm going to pick the Jaguars to win this one 31-20. Caleb Bunch, Joe Brrr. Yeah. I'm happy that Joe Burrow's back. And actually, you know what? Let's talk about this game. We got the Cincinnati Bengals and the Buffalo Bills. This is going to be a huge, huge game here. And I'm going to deviate from the main narrative here, which is Josh Allen versus Joe Burrow, because I think that this game is going to be won by whoever dominates the trenches. Chase Brown in the last 6 to 7 weeks has really shaken off the rust. He's starting to look like, the transcendent running back that we all thought he could be, towards the end of last year. And now he's well over 700 rushing yards. And, he had an outstanding game last week against the Baltimore Ravens. He had well over 100 yards from scrimmage. But James Cook, on the other hand, completely balled out. And he was the biggest reason why they were able to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers and why they flat out dominated the time of possession. So the two running backs should honestly be the ones under the biggest spotlight here. But from Cincinnati's perspective, they better make sure they run the football well, because Buffalo's defense, while they do have their flaws and while they do have a lot of key absences to overcome, they still allow only 163 passing yards per game, which is the fewest in the National Football League. Now, I understand Cincinnati has Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Andre Yoshivaz and Mike Gesicki, the whole lot, and Joe Burrow coming back. But if they cannot run the football, then at Highmark Stadium, I hate to say it, I'm scared that Joe Burrow might walk himself into a trap. But at the end of the day, Joe Burrow is still undefeated against Josh Allen. And it is kind of ironic considering that Allen has won an MVP and Burrow has been to a Super Bowl. And Cincinnati's defense hasn't been particularly strong this year. But in the last 2 weeks, they held their own against Drake May and Lamar Jackson. Against the Ravens, they had their best game of the season by far, going on the road, forcing 5 turnovers, making them look as one-dimensional as they did. It was flat out impressive. And I texted the one Bengals fan I knew to say, I am so proud of you. I hope you kick Buffalo's ass next week. And I was saying that as a Patriots fan. So I freaking love you, Olivia. Predicting the winner of this game, I hate to say it. Having said all of that, I got to pick the Bills in this one because, I mean, let's face it. The Bengals, they've been great the last 2 weeks, both offensively and defensively. Well, more defensively than the other side, which is really strange to say. But I think with both quarterbacks at full strength, like I said earlier, it's going to come down to who can run the football more effectively and who could show up in the final 2 minutes in the clutch. And knowing that Josh Allen has the better team at his disposal, I got to pick the Bills to just have the edge over this one. So my final score, it's going to be very close. I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair, but I expect the Bills to win this one 34 to 31. I hate to say it, Olivia, don't punch me in the face. But we got 2 more games on the 1 o'clock docket. We have the Commanders and the Vikings. Oh, boy. You know, if this game were played last year, this would be one of the most watched games of the year. But now both teams are in absolute purgatory for different reasons. Let's start with the Minnesota Vikings, shall we? The biggest weakness for their team is very simple. They don't have a quarterback. J.J. McCarthy is hurt, and yet whenever he is healthy, he's absolutely terrible. Carson Wentz is out for the season with a shoulder injury. And Max Brosmer, in his first and probably only start of his NFL career, he was flat out trash. He was trash. Put it to you this way. 4th and 3 at the 4-yard line. There's about 5 minutes left to go in the second quarter. The defense has only allowed 3 points. 3 points. Jackson Smith-Njigba didn't even have a catch. And on 4th and 3, he rolls out to the right. DeMarcus Lawrence comes unblocked, has the quarterback in the grass. Max Brosmer just tries to chuck it away. It lands right into Ernest Jones' hands. He takes it to the house. Pick 6. Whole momentum swung there. And that was just the first of 4 interceptions that Max Brosmer threw. That was flat out abysmal. And that was a complete waste of an outstanding defensive performance from Brian Flores' guys. Because if you told me that Sam Darnold was only going to have 126 passing yards, that JSN would only have 2 catches, and it was only going to take 1 touch, and that they were only going to score 1 touchdown, I'd say, holy crap, Minnesota might have a chance to win this game. But they got completely shut out, all because their quarterback is flat out putrid. It's absolutely disgraceful. I feel so bad for Justin Jefferson and Aaron Jones and Jordan Addison, and more importantly, Kevin O'Connell, because he didn't think that this season was going to go as poorly as it did. This is the reigning coach of the year that we are talking about, and he has to deal with that every single week. It's unacceptable. And it's why a lot of reports are coming out that they are not afraid to sign or draft a quarterback this next offseason. Because if J.J. McCarthy is going to continue to play as bad as he did when he comes back from concussion protocol, then I hate to say it, there are a few guys out there that are, relishing at the opportunity here. So Washington, on the other hand, they've lost their 7th straight game. They are unfortunately, listen, they got Terry McLaurin back. and his return was huge. You could tell that this offense was significantly better with him on the football field. But Marcus Mariota played as well as you would have wanted him to play. We thought it was going to be a blowout, but to his credit, they went to the wire. It got to overtime. They went for two to try to win the game. But on a wide open pass attempt to Jeremy McNichols, Nick Bonito on an unblocked rush, batted the pass down to give the Broncos the win. And unfortunately, I don't think that was the only play that, sealed the deal for the Commanders here. If you remember, on the second drive of the game, Mariota threw an interception to Drake Greenlaw. And in the fourth quarter, when the Broncos, tried to keep the Washington Commanders in that game for as long as possible, the Commanders only settled for 2 field goals, and they ended up going to overtime when they had several chances to, get in the end zone and win the game themselves. There were a few penalties that overturned a lot of big plays. They couldn't really run the football as well down the stretch, even though Chris Rodriguez, had a really respectable performance overall. And that batted pass, unfortunately, just, crushed any sort of false optimism that they had left. But having said this, I think that they should win against the Minnesota Vikings here, because even if Jayden Daniels doesn't return from that shoulder injury, he hasn't been cleared to return to contact yet, or he hasn't been cleared for contact yet, I should say. Their offense, they can run the football really well. They got Terry McLaurin back. The offense looked a lot better than I thought they would against one of the best defenses in the National Football League. But Brian Flores is still one of the most aggressive defensive minds in the league. And with how well his defense looked against Sam Darnold, he could very well do the same against Marcus Mariota. That Vikings defense has been the least of their issues this year. Yeah, they had a couple of stinkers against Philly and against the LA Chargers, but for the most part, they've been one of the best units in the league. And unfortunately, it's going to be all for naught if their offense continues to look as trash. So I'm going to pick the Commanders to win this one. For my final score, I say they win 24-14. Just because, again, the Minnesota Vikings, for all the talent they have, they don't have a quarterback. And I hate to say that. All right, next we got the Seahawks and the Falcons. I'm going to be quite frank here. I'm just going to pick the Seattle Seahawks to win in a blowout. I mean, the Falcons just lost all sympathy for me. They are absolutely egregious. Their offense is one of the worst units in the league, despite all the talent that they've got. They don't have a first-round pick next year. The defense is really starting to slip up. And Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot need to be gone now, because Raheem Morris is not evolved. Terry Fontenot threw a boatload of money at Kirk Cousins when and not only did he completely blow up in their faces, but they ended up drafting a quarterback in the first round the very next month, and he's now out for the season with a partially torn ACL. Bijan Robinson is probably the only consistent player that they have on their offense right now, because Drake London is hurt. Despite the fact that their defense is still top 5 in sacks, that they still don't give up a whole lot of yards, despite the fact that their offense has Drake London and Darnell Mooney and Bijan and Tyler Algier and Kyle Pitts and one of the best offensive lines in the league, yet they're 4-8. It's abysmal, and it's disgraceful. And now they're going up against a Seahawks team hoping to have a cleaner performance on both sides of the ball. Seattle Seahawks, you're winning this by double digits, 31-7. That's going to be my final score. It's just, what a disgrace. Okay, now we get to the late afternoon window. We got the Broncos and the Raiders. The Raiders, unfortunately, they got blown out by the Chargers despite being tied at halftime at 7. The Broncos, they were able to hold on in overtime against the Washington Commanders. All I can ask for the Broncos is this: please don't make this into another close game. I mean, it was bad enough that we had to see them barely win 10-7. I think that was the final score at Mile High on Thursday Night Football. But just take care of business in this one. You have a way better defense. Your offense is an incredibly balanced unit. Bo Nix doesn't have to be the hero in this one. As long as you can run the ball effectively, and as long as you can, possess the ball for as long as you can, then you can do whatever it takes to just try to win by double digits. You don't have to do too much. You don't have to play over your heads. You don't have to be over aggressive. All you have to do is just stick to the script, and that'll be that. Because the Raiders got completely overwhelmed on third down and by the run last week. So the Broncos should just stick to that formula. Okay? Okay. Denver Broncos, you should take care of business. You should win this one handedly. But knowing that they only have 2 games where they won by double digits, I'm just going to go with a more respectable score and say they win 27-13. Okay, we got the Rams and the Cardinals. Don't worry, I'll get to this in just a second. But the Rams and the Cardinals. Oh boy. So we already talked about the Arizona Cardinals. They had another chance to win in the fourth quarter, but they came up short due to self-inflicted mistakes. The Rams, on the other hand, are coming into this game coming off a very similar loss because they had a winnable situation presented before them against the Carolina Panthers. They only lost by 3 points. And the biggest reason why, it was because of 2 things. Number 1, Matthew Stafford. And I hate to say this, entering this game, it looked like he was going to have the landslide lead for the MVP. But unfortunately for him, he threw 2 interceptions. The first time he's done that since week 3 against the Philadelphia Eagles. The first time he's thrown an interception in a game. And when he did have a chance to close the deal, he got strip sacked by Derek Brown. The Carolina Panthers recovered the football. And 1 first down to Jalen Coker put the game on ice. So those 3 turnovers, they ended up being the biggest difference in that football game. One of them was a pick 6 from Mike Jackson in a 3-point loss. So just imagine how big of a difference the game would have turned out, or just imagine how different that game would have turned out if that play didn't happen. But the defense, they're not supposed to get let off the hook either, because the 2 biggest plays of the game were on 4th down. And Bryce Young, on both those plays, took a shot down the field, attacking Emmanuel Forbes in man coverage, and both Jalen Coker and Ted McMillan broke free in stride for 2 30-plus yard touchdowns that really gave the Carolina Panthers the edge in this one. Bryce Young was flat out tremendous. Even though they ran the ball for 140 yards with Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle, Bryce Young only threw 5 incompletions, had well over 200 passing yards, and 3 touchdown passes, no interceptions. And I'll talk about the Carolina Panthers next week when they, return to action. But we never really know what we get from them on a week-to-week basis. When we don't have expectations from them, they win. And when we do think they have a shot, they absolutely disappoint and they look like bottom feeders. So I digress. And having said all of this, I think the Rams are going to bounce back tremendously. I don't think it's going to take a near fourth quarter comeback for the Rams to win this one. I think that they are stronger on both sides of the football. I think Matthew Stafford is going to have a way better performance than he did last week. And more importantly, I expect the defense to really set the tone from beginning to end. So I expect them to win this game by double digits. LA hangs on 34-17. Now we get to the game that I think everybody in Medill Sports wants me to talk about. We got the Green Bay Packers versus the Chicago Bears. So, Black Friday, the Bears were able to have one of their most convincing victories of the season. They ran for over 280 yards against the Philadelphia Eagles defense, while Chicago's defense, on the other hand, completely shut down Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, not A.J. Brown because he caught 10 passes for over 100 yards with 2 touchdown receptions, but they kept the Eagles' offense in check for a huge chunk of that ball game. They only let up 2 first downs in the first half. And Chicago, yeah, they only won by 9 points, but it was 24-9 at one point. This was not a close game. They laid out a statement where that's a game that you need to win to insert yourselves in the playoff race. And right now, they have the number 1 seed in the NFC, which is absolutely ridiculous. And entering the Medill building, entering the Medill studios, I had to get a lot of crap from a lot of Bears fans. that go to school with me. The Tyler Bednars, the Sarah Gallas, the Sarah Forces, Monique Lewis, pretty much everybody. Actually, I had somebody put up a fake mic to my hand and say, and the number one team in the NFC is, and I'm like looking around, I'm like, what the heck are you guys doing? Are you guys serious? And yet nobody was budging. They wanted me to say it. And unfortunately, I just had to pull off the Bill Schwartzky impression and just go, the Bears. I'm happy for them. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to come off as a hater, but my gosh, the way that they've been winning football games is just flat out surprising. I mean, Caleb Williams has been a very average quarterback, a very streaky quarterback, yet they win games because the defense forces a lot of takeaways. They run the football really well, and they show up and they play well in the fourth quarter. And I got to tip my hat to them. But having said all of that, this is the biggest game of their lives because they're going on the road in the frozen tundra to play the Green Bay Packers, their most hated division rival, who just swept the Detroit Lions this year. Not only that, they wiped the freaking floor with them. Green Bay right now is saying, okay, you might have beaten us last year at Lambeau Field, but it was in the regular season finale, and we were playing backups in the second half. So we don't really know if you're capable of beating us at full strength. We might be a big deal to you, but you're not really that big of a deal to us because you haven't really beaten us when it matters most. Jordan Love was flat out phenomenal. 4 touchdown passes against Detroit. He was the biggest reason why they won that football game. The defense, yeah, they bent on a few drives, but they forced 2 huge fourth down stops. They sacked Jared Goff 3 times, and really, they just forced the Lions to play one-dimensional for most of the second half. And now they're going up against the very opportunistic Bears defense. So one little slip-up and one little mistake could give the Bears the edge that they need to win that football game. And I get that it takes a very long time for the Bears offense to finally get into a consistent groove and a consistent rhythm, especially down the stretch. But this is not a team that you want to underestimate and not one that you want to take lightly. And that goes for the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks as well. So from Green Bay's perspective, you better make sure you take care of business at home. From the Bears' perspective, you need to play absolutely phenomenal in all 3 phases. One particular player, Caleb Williams. You need to play exactly the way you did against the Pittsburgh Steelers a couple weeks ago, which is capitalize off of opponents' miscues with touchdowns, be the reason why you lead the charge, and not stumble into another up-and-down performance. Because if you do that against a very good Packers defense, you're going to have to play keep up the entire afternoon, and it's not going to bode well for the Windy City. I hate to say that. I would like to see Ben Johnson go shirtless again in the locker room because I thought that was just freaking hilarious. But I hate to say it because I don't want to lose a lot of people. I don't want to lose a lot of friends here, but the Green Bay Packers are winning this football game. It's at home. They're at Lambeau Field. And more importantly, I trust Jordan Love more than I do Caleb Williams. So until Chicago finally, can get over the hump, I'm going to have to believe it when I see it. Hate to say it. Womp womp. I'm going to pick the Packers to win this game 27-24. It's going to be a really great grudge match. It's going to go down to the wire once again. But like I said, it comes down to the quarterback play. And it's all love. It is all love. Yeah. All right, let's get to the 2 primetime showdowns. Sunday Night Football. Oh my gosh. I couldn't even. I'm surprised I was even able to get through that with a straight face. I'm sorry. But Sunday Night Football, we have the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Houston Texans. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might say, well, Colin, you're probably going to pick the Texans to win this game, right? Because they've won, 4 games in a row? Unfortunately, I don't see that happen because this is the 3rd time in 2 years that these teams will be playing each other in Arrowhead Stadium. And the last 2 matchups have followed the exact same script. Chiefs got off to a really great start. The Texans, tried to, stay within striking distance. They had a big touchdown early in the 3rd quarter to potentially tie the game. but a missed extra point from Ka'imi Fairbairn swung the entire game in an opposite direction. For this matchup, I'm not worried about the defense here, the Texans defense, because I think that even against Patrick Mahomes, who is still playing at an elite level, I think they can have a pretty respectable performance. Kansas City might be without three of its starting offensive linemen. They might not have Josh Simmons. They might not have Jawan Taylor. They've already been without Trey Smith. And you're going up against the best defense in the National Football League with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter and an incredibly lethal unit with so many playmakers in all three levels. So, Kansas City, they're a very undisciplined team. They're one of the top 10 teams in penalties. They need to have a very clean game for them to win on Sunday night. And at home, they have been really strong. They're 5-1 at Arrowhead Stadium, and a few of their wins have been against quality opponents, like the Detroit Lions and the Indianapolis Colts. And I think the Houston Texans could just be another addition to that list. But they cannot afford to get in their own way the way they did against the Kansas City, the way they did against the Dallas Cowboys. Patrick Mahomes was the least of their issues because he was sensational. Unfortunately, there were way too many penalties and there were a few bad drops that, really kept the Kansas City Chiefs from, taking the edge late down the stretch. And Dak Prescott made the plays that he needed to ended up hanging on at the end. And that's why I gave the Cowboys their flowers earlier in the show. From CJ Stroud's side of things, he needs to be the best player on that football field because Kansas City, Steve Spagnuolo, he is going to throw every type of blitz at him from all different directions. They're going to shut down the run. They're going to try to take away Nico Collins. They're going to really attack an offensive line that I still think is very suspect. And they're going to make CJ Stroud completely carry that team to the finish line. And it doesn't matter how well their defense plays. If they can't get any sort of life or any sort of pulse from their offense, it's going to be all for naught. So for that reason alone, I'm going to pick the Kansas City Chiefs to win this game 23-15. It's going to be a low-scoring game. I know that both defenses are going to be the biggest reasons why this game is competitive, but like I said in some of the other games that I've talked about, it's going to come down to the quarterback, and I trust Patrick Mahomes more than I do CJ Stroud. So, 23-15. Now we get to Monday Night Football, and we are going to be in for one showdown here. Whether you watch the normal broadcast featuring Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, or the alternate one with Monsters Inc. taking over, these offenses are going to need to have outstanding performances, and they are going to need to show up in the biggest moments. More importantly, Philadelphia. Offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo, we know that he is not the guy that needs to be calling plays next year. But I don't think it's justified for the fans to figure out where he lives and to egg his house. It's disgraceful, it's unacceptable, and I really feel for the guy because at the end of the day, it's a game, and you shouldn't have to take out your personal feelings on a guy that's just trying to do his job. I don't like the job that he's been doing, but those aren't the measures that we should be going towards as a society. So I'm going to just get that elephant out of the room. But having said all of that, the way the Eagles offense has played this year has been disgraceful. I understand that Lane Johnson has been out with a Liz Frank injury. I know that this offensive line has not been as strong as they were in the past. I get that. But you got the reigning Super Bowl MVP, one of the top two running backs in football, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, an offensive line that still has a lot of talent on paper, and yet they're one of the worst rushing attacks and one of the worst passing groups in the league. It's unacceptable. And the fact that they haven't even made a change at the play caller position means that this is going to be 2023 all over again, where you have a great start to the season, you have clear flaws, yet they get camouflaged because you have a great record, but then towards the second half of the season, the team just implodes and they get absolutely annihilated in the playoffs. That is what this game looks like to me. But more alarming was how their defense got humiliated and their asses kicked by letting up over 280 rushing yards to the Chicago Bears at Philadelphia. And now you're going up against a Chargers offense that really took over in the second half on the ground. What happened on the second play of the second half? Remember, Kamani Vidal, what he did? Simple toss play. You have pulls from the tackle, pulls from the guard, and he goes all the way 59 yards to the house. They go ahead 14-7, and the Chargers just seize momentum from there, and they win 31-14 after being tied at 7 at halftime. So the Eagles, they're going to need they needed a reality check quickly, and I think their defense will be the biggest reason why they have an edge in this one, because even though Jalen Carter recently had an operation to have both of his shoulders fixed, I know that Philadelphia's defense is going to do whatever it takes to win this game. However, Justin Herbert, even though he's been sacked the 7th most times in the league this year, he's still been playing like a top 10 quarterback. And there are a few key pieces in that Chargers offense that could pay dividends as this game unfolds. If Justin Herbert could outplay Patrick Mahomes to start the year, then I think he could do that against Jalen Hurts. So I got to side with Brock Morgan on this one, because in our show on Wednesday, he said, I got the Eagles losing to the Chargers. I got the Eagles losing to the Bills. I don't necessarily have them losing. Actually, I don't necessarily have them losing to Buffalo, but we'll save that discussion for another time. But I do think that the Chargers can win a pretty tight grudge match and, win this one 20-17. And again, it just really comes down to which offense I'm more comfortable in or more confident in. And I hate to say it, but from Philadelphia's perspective, you need to get your SHIT together badly. So, with that being said, the games are officially locked in. Thank you all so much for watching. Once again, it is your host with the most, the big guy himself, Colin O'Callahan. We'll see you next time with another episode, and hope you have a great rest of your week. Goodbye, everyone. Love y'all. Take care.